The definition of a showrunner is the person who has overall creative authority and management responsibility for a television program. In other words, someone who is the main voice for story, plots, subplots, characters, and settings. More often than not, they are one of the writers, and usually an executive producer. They are trusted with how the show goes, and, more often than not, it's their voice that goes through. They will usually listen to other writers for any ideas. The showrunner does not usually mean they create the show, but they do drive the direction on how the product is. Some shows have the showrunner or showrunners throughout their entire history. However, sometimes the showrunner does change while the show is still going. Sure, the show seems the same, but because the main voice has changed, so does the direction of the show. Sometimes it works, but other times the quality wildly differs, to the point where seasonal rot can happen, character derailment can happen as well, plot holes add up, and the show would not be the same. This could even apply to shows that have always had the same people behind it. It's not always a case of only the creator does it right. Even the best showrunners stumble with an episode here or there. Most people think showrunners can only do comedy shows and dramas, but not many people talk about one type of show that has a showrunner, sketch comedy. And there is one show that stands out and is a good example of when a showrunner's voice is needed, for better and for worse. In the early 90s, a sketch comedy show made waves throughout the air. It was called In Living Color. It was a show that was a touch edgier than the usual shows that were out at the time. Married with Children and The Simpsons were exceptions. But In Living Color was coming off of the relatively getting on in years Cosby Show. People wanted to see something that challenged the social norms, something that challenged authority. And with Married with Children being a live-action sitcom to do that, and The Simpsons being an animated sitcom that did the same, In Living Color would take those same reins as a sketch comedy show that also did the envelope pushing. And a cast of actors who specialized in comedy like Damon Wayans, Tom Davidson, Jamie Foxx, David Alan Grier, and of course James Carey. And with a bunch of talented writers spearheaded by Keenen Ivory Wayans. Wayans was the showrunner for the first few seasons of the show, looking over what would be able to go on air and appearing in the opening of every episode for the seasons he was on, specifically the first 3 seasons. And despite the fact that he was the lead voice of the show, there were a lot of difficulties behind in the writer's room. He was often hard to please in terms of getting jokes on air, which was stated in the In Living Color book, Homie Don't Play That. It got to the point where the writer's room was cutthroat and intense, with some writers leaving the show in a couple of seasons, sometimes even less. There was also the nepotism problem with Ivy Wayans having some of his family being on the show, while others had to work hard to get a small role. Shawn Wayans would appear on the show's quote-unquote DJ, meaning he was a pretty face pretending to play music, while actual music was played before he was added to the cast in season 3. And despite the many behind-the-scenes issues, Keenen did know what was best for the show, and with that, In Living Color was the biggest, hottest TV show on Fox. And with the peak comes the executive meddling. Because of the many characters that were popular on the show, Fox saw dollar signs and wanted more and more catch-raising moneymakers. And there was also the issues with censors who wanted to cut more and more of the edge that made the show work. This was apparent during the season 4 premiere, which dealt with the Rodney King riots and the aftermath. It was way too hot of a topic, causing the network, who loved the show, to start clamping down, causing the creative process to be more and more strained. And with the strain being more and more unbearable, Ivy Wayans announced that he would be leaving, and the rest of the Wayans siblings followed suit by the end of season 4. And if one sees the show throughout the entire history, there is a big difference between the first 3 seasons and the later 2. What made the characters on the show compelling and funny ended up being run into the ground and one-dimensional. While season 4 was at least watchable, it got even worse in season 5 where the creative morale ran low. There was little to no direction, the humor was lacking in some respects, not helping the fact that James Carey was not on the show a lot due to commitment to Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And on top of that, the addition of several new cast members were added, but they did not gel with the audience. In other words, for all the problems that the show had, and for as hard of a boss he was to work with, the show did not work without their prime voice. And so the show ended not with a bang, but with a dark future. So, many years later, the question needs to be asked, was season 5 of In Living Color bad? Let's take a step back. All in all, it is the worst season of the show, but only because it started out as a provocative, daring, edgy show, and the last season made it seem like a very good sketch comedy show, and that was the worst thing about it. going from daring to safe in the span of a season or two. However, there was a possibility that the show would come back, with some of the original cast returning, albeit in a lesser role, because there would be a newer cast that would take over. However, it ultimately did not come to be since it did not gel, as well as the fact that other sketch comedy shows like Key and Peele did it for a modern day audience, and made In Living Color not really needed. Would the show be good if the show kept going? For that answer, let's look at another sketch comedy show, Saturday Night Live, and its first 5 seasons. With its not ready for primetime cast that included Chevy Chase, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Gilda Radner, with its unique and daring brand of humor that no one saw before, thanks to its writing staff, it became the water cooler discussion of the day. In other words, the first 5 seasons of SNL were like the first 3 seasons of In Living Color. Neither shows seemed like anything special to today's viewers, but in their respective beginnings, they set a template that other shows would build upon. However, when Lorne Michaels, the man behind the show, left, so did the original cast, leading to an uncertain future. But ultimately, the show kept going, hiring a new cast, and the 6th season was not the best, to say the least. But there was some talent that included Charles Rocket, Gilbert Gottfried, and a young Eddie Murphy. Again, the show had a rough start in the 6th season, but eventually it improved thanks to time to figure itself out, and the show is still going on as of 2021. Would the show ever return to the quality of the first 5 seasons? No, but the show is what it is today because people enjoy the hard work the show puts into it, making talented people rise in the process. So, looking at In Living Color, the same thing would happen if the show were still on today. Changes would happen, the quality would widely differ, but it would still be a decent sketch show even if some of the bite was taken out of it. The cast that was added in the final season would have found their footing and would have been embraced by the audience. If anything, they would shine in their own right. And the show honestly would have gotten better as cast and writers rotated as long as it had a mostly African American cast. But the voice of the show was gone and the show was laid to rest. So there is a reason why there needs to be someone in charge. Things will pretty much fall on the wayside and the direction will be all over the place. That doesn't mean the show was instantly dead, just changed. And Living Color changed when Keenan left, and it was not great for it, but it goes to show that, for better and for worse, the voice is needed. The voice knows what should go where and how to give the extra appeal of it. The voice may change, but remember, even the creators have their issues. Sometimes the voice is not always right, but it is a step in a straightforward direction.